we're going to talk about Twitter and how congressional representatives are calling for investigations of big tech's collusion with the deep state, and it's really happening along a party lines. This is a story that everybody really should care about because we're seeing now a social media company being influenced by government actors, many of them unelected, and we can be pretty sure that this is happening, being mirrored and matched across every social platform. We haven't heard boo from Facebook or YouTube about how and when and exactly who is doing this inside of their platforms, but we would be ignorant to believe that it is not.
Well, also, we did see that there was a couple of independent reports. We haven't verified it yet, but where they've identified dozens upon dozens of people who worked at the FBI, the CIA, formerly had it in their bios on LinkedIn, who are currently working at Facebook.
Yeah.
Former CIA, former FBI, who are now working at Facebook.
Well, in the most recent document dumps for Twitter, actually, there's a long list of FBI employees that worked for Twitter. And in fact, many of the times when FBI agents were corresponding with executives at Twitter and they said, oh, who there might have security clearance? They said, Jim Baker happens to work here. And even though the FBI agent and Jim Baker were colleagues, he's like, oh, forgot about him. Like, this really strange behavior. And there is a long list of names of Twitter executives that had FBI experience that had just recently made that little hop.
So on Sunday, we saw Congressman Mike Turner, who sits now on the House Intelligence Committee. He's now going to be the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee when they take power in January. He's calling for an investigation into big tech's collusion with the deep state. Here's what he said to Maria Bartiromo. Watch.
You're going to be the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and you will have oversight of these agencies. What is your priority, and how will you use subpoena power?
Well, our committee became aware of these activities earlier this year, and I want to thank Elon Musk for bringing forward the information that he had, because while we pursue the intelligence community to try to hold them accountable, while we're doing that, Elon Musk is showing what's happening on the other side with the willing partners, the mainstream media, social media, and really exposing the coordination that was occurring between the FBI and them. Now, it is my understanding from our contacts that we've had with the FBI that there are secret files that the FBI has of these contacts that they were having with social media and with mainstream media. And it has been our objective to get a hold of those files, to see the extent of this so we can stop it, we can cut off the funding and prevent, obviously, average Americans being impacted by FBI actions.
So the question today is, and there's been, you saw defund the FBI floating around on Twitter. A lot of people are calling for it. Okay, we talked all about defunding the police.
Yeah.
What about defunding the FBI? Like, where are the Democrats who are all about defunding the police? What about this? What about the FBI?
Oh, not if they're doing our bidding. And we're going to see that they absolutely are. It's fine to talk about these elected officials saying, well, we're going to get to the bottom of this, or but again, as we saw today when the January 6th committee recommended Trump for criminal charges, they don't have that power. Like Maria Bartiromo was just asking, what are you going to do with your subpoena power? That's really all. They can compel you to testify. They can listen to what you have to say. They can write a lot of stern letters. As Red Pill Graphics in the chat said, more hearings, stern letters, no arrests, right? So we can get excited about what Congress does, and we always seem to, like a dog, like, ooh, good, there's going to be an investigation of this. We had that even around Robinhood when they decided to suppress stocks. But that doesn't mean anything happens.
No, and then SPF and FTX and all that stuff. Yeah.
It's just all theater. It's like they get everybody riled up. It's like this team versus this. It's like they just have us basically watching gladiators in a ring. And it's like we have these enormous battles and everybody battles it out on social and who's right, who's wrong. But the people who actually do things never pay for any of it.
No,
so
they don't.
It's all theater.
Yeah, I mean, think about
we don't do it.
Yeah, think about the 2008 collapse, right? The housing collapse. And no one in the United States, no one was prosecuted. No one. Can you imagine?
There were some committees.
Yeah, they had some committees and they sent some stern letters. So the other side of this I'm really worried about, you have Adam Shifty Schiff, Democrat Representative Adam Schiff of California. He's now threatening the social media companies after Elon Musk allowed conservatives back on Twitter. So this is the other side of this. Like, he's like, okay, now we need these social media companies to do a better job of policing. And if they don't do it, we're going to do it. He said that social media companies, that Congress would take away their Section 230 immunity if they do not moderate content. Like, what kind of country are we living in? Listen to Schiff.
I think we've got a big problem right now with social media companies and their failure to moderate content and the explosion of hate on Twitter, the banning of journalists on Twitter. I don't think these companies should enjoy an immunity from liability when they behave this way. We can't tell them what to say or not say, but we gave them immunity. We said, if you'll be responsible moderators of content, we will give you immunity. They haven't been, so why should they continue to enjoy that immunity from responsibility and liability?
So we can't tell you what to say. Yeah, you can. That's what the Twitter Files is all about. Right? You've been telling people what they can and cannot say. They can't talk about COVID. They couldn't talk about vaccines on social media because you at the Department of Homeland Security and the CDC pushed these companies to do your bidding. So you absolutely have been doing that. And now you're upset that a few journalists got booted from Twitter for doxing people. Taylor Lorenz, I mean, she was actively publishing people's personal information and addresses on social media. That's what got her banned. Yes. Like, you're not allowed to dox people. You're not allowed to put out people's private information and where they live and their addresses.
And who has gotten hurt because Peter McCullough is back on Twitter?
Right.
Who's being harmed by that?
No, you should ask the other question. Who was harmed by him not being on Twitter?
That is a good question. Who's being hurt by Trump being reactivated? He's not even speaking. Myra Forrester, who got booted off of Twitter for saying that gender ideology will hurt women's policies and women's rights. Got booted off Twitter. She's back. Who's been hurt except for maybe trans activists' feelings and agenda?
Right. Some people in San Francisco got their feelings hurt
by seeing Myra Forrester's profile back and tweeting.
So Senator Hawley has been one of the people that's been going after the Department of Homeland Security, specifically going after Mayorkas on this disinformation campaign, how the relationship between the Department of Homeland Security and these social media companies. Like, what are you guys doing as far as like blocking and censoring content? And you know that this is going to even take on in the next couple of weeks here after Christmas, this is going to go full steam ahead. Here's Senator Hawley taking on Mayorkas on this question.
Example after example of this administration coordinated, apparently, according to a federal court, by your agency, pressuring, coercing social media companies to engage in censorship. Is that constitutional?
That is unequivocally false.
Is what the emails show.
It is unequivocally false, Senator.
You are not pressuring the big tech companies to take down accounts. You are not meeting with them to ask them to censor on your behalf.
That is correct. We are not.
Mr. Secretary, it has been established for years in this country, as you very well know because you're a lawyer, that the federal government may not use private third parties to engage in activities that are unconstitutional. That's exactly what you and this administration are doing. You are leveraging private companies to carry out censorship on your behalf. It's dystopian, but worse than that, it's unconstitutional.
It's also false.
It's absolutely true. So that was a total lie.
Yes.
He lied right to the American people that they were not, the Department of Homeland Security wasn't influencing Twitter, Facebook, etc. We now know that was an absolute lie.
Yes, we're going to show you that in the Twitter files.
And so, too, when Christopher Wray, from the head of the FBI, sat there and lied right to the American people, right in that same committee on their influencing with social media companies. Nope, we're not involved in it. Nope, sorry, we're not.
Jen Psaki, Biden's press secretary, admitted it to the press and all of us that it was happening.
Right. Mm-hmm. But nope, that's unequivocally false. Nope, not going to say anything. So we got this new round of Twitter files that just dropped a few hours ago. Number 7, I guess, is the new batch of Twitter files.
Okay, so no, I think that's number 8. We're losing count. We're just going to sort of catch you up of what we haven't covered over the weekend, and then we'll get to. So there were 2 document dumps by Matt Taibbi over the weekend, and then a few hours ago by Michael Schellenberger. So let's just start with the Matt Taibbi ones that they called them like supplements. So I'm a little getting lost in the. If they would just use ABC, I might be a little bit, or Roman numerals, or
like Super Bowls.
I don't know.
I'm for the Roman numerals because then at some point we get the X-Files.
Yes.
Yes, right. Okay.
All right. So this is the batch from this weekend.
This is from Saturday. They're at least dated. We'll just go with Saturday. Okay. So what he establishes over Saturday is just that the FBI contact with Twitter is constant and pervasive. He calls it a subsidiary. He talks about this Yoel Roth, who we've talked about many times. Between these 2 years, there are over 150 emails going back and forth. Some are fine, like, hey, Happy New Year. Looking forward to our quarterly call next week, which we will see quickly becomes a weekly call. But he says a surprisingly high number are requests by the FBI for Twitter to take action on election misinformation, even involving joke tweets from low follower accounts. Number 7 is the real one that I want to bring your attention to. It says the FBI Social Media Focus Task Force, known as FTIF, created in the wake of the 2016 election, swelled to 80 agents and corresponded with Twitter to identify alleged foreign influence and election tampering of all kinds. So that should bother us because it was created as a result of the 2016 election. So here is the government saying, we didn't like how this election turned out. You can agree with them if you want to. You can even say, I didn't like 2016's election either, but it was a fair election. It was an open election. And they said, we don't like how that went. So we're going in to make sure that the people don't speak for themselves and let this happen again. Now, that brings up all kinds of questions because this was created under Trump. The outcome meant that Trump was elected. They didn't like it, so they started to then work against it. Did he know? Was he maybe not paying attention, or was it kept from him? Would he have stopped it, knowing that a government agency was working to prevent his reelection? I mean,
clearly he would have. This is the deep state working behind the scenes on this. If he knew about it, of course he would have. To think he would have.
Again, what I see so often is people who don't like Trump saying, "Yeah, that was necessary because we didn't want another Trump," but you should be bothered by this because it's unelected officials saying we can't let democracy run its course if we get this guy.
You're too stupid to vote, so we can't let your votes count. So we're gonna sway an election instead because you guys are too stupid.
Yes, and so I saw the President Trump ad from last week. He's saying if I am ever reelected, I'll never let this happen. But it did happen so I want some answers on how this was kept from him, how it happened, how, it was happening inside the Justice Department, which was a mess because of the Mueller investigation. So it's quite likely he wasn't paying attention because there was another mess happening around Russiagate, which we're going to get to in a second. Now, Taibbi points out that many government agencies, were working to flag content for Twitter. The Department of Homeland Security and the FBI were the biggies. And it was fairly brazen, too. They didn't ask. They told. Here's an email. It's like, hey, FBI San Francisco is notifying you of these accounts, which we'd like you to take action on. And it was just like it was like a chore list. At one point, they gave them such a long list of users to take action on that Twitter employees had to sort of high-five each other, like, whoa, that was a lot. Thanks, everybody, for working on that. As if the FBI were paying their salaries. They weren't. Twitter was, but they were acting as if they worked for the government. Taibbi points out
that signature. It just says Fred, FBI SF, and it's not like any official.
Fred.
Like, how an official government email, it should say, like, this email is sent from the government. Like, there should be, but it's just Fred.
Fred.
Well, they're on
FBI.
a first-name basis with Fred.
Right.
Fred. I should point
FBI
out,
Fred again.
We learned from Michael Schellenberger this afternoon that, in fact, the FBI was paying Twitter. So the FBI was paying, they raised, and Jim Baker was like high-fiving in the office. They got over $3 million from the FBI. They paid them for their staffing time. So the FBI was actively paying Twitter money.
I mean, at least they weren't, using.
But they're using our tax dollars to censor Americans. Think about that. Like, you pay your taxes, it goes to the IRS, it gets dispersed. The FBI gets some money, uses some of its budget from you to censor you. Really? I mean, that's an abusive relationship.
Now,
I wonder if that went directly to the people that were helping, like Yoel Roth and people like I wonder if they got their palms greased for helping.
Oh, yes.
You know
I
what
would
mean?
like to see a little bit of finances from Yoel Roth. Okay, that's an interesting question. Taibbi points out that the ubiquity of the 2016 Russian interference story as stated pretext for building out the censorship machine can't be overstated. It's analogous to how 9/11 inspired the expansion of the security estate. Here's documentation that he posts of this. The Office of Intelligence and Analysis talking about how Russian malign influence use of permissive social media platforms. Now, I don't have the screens from Michael Schellenberger, which just happened a few hours ago, but actually, as it relates to the Russian story, Twitter was constantly being told by the FBI that Russian influence was pervasive and it was going to increase, and specifically that it was responsible for the Hunter Biden laptop story. Yoel Roth, to his credit, continues to say, we don't see that. We don't see a lot of Russian bots. We don't see a lot of Russian accounts posing as Americans. We don't see a lot of Russian information campaigns. We definitely don't see it around. He just keeps pushing back and saying, okay, yeah, we'll look for that, but we don't see it. In fact, he even told Kara Swisher that when they warned him that this might be Russian influence, he had said, it sort of set off my spidey sense and didn't feel right, but I went along with it. I mean, he doesn't give us the whole story in that I went along with it because they were my BFFs for 2 years prior. Right. He just said like, oh, I thought, okay, I'll do this. No, he had been actively groomed to do so. In fact, he outlines, Matt Taibbi, what happens when governments flagged things that were not bounced and how that is so unusual that they were asked to explain, like, hey, we told you to do this. Why didn't it happen? The agency had a direct channel called Teleporter to report things they didn't like. In a thread, Yoel Roth, I can't say that quickly. It just doesn't roll off the tongue. Corresponds on Sunday, this is more we got from Sunday, with an FBI agent about foreign intelligence, which the FBI doesn't usually deal with. They're more of a domestic outfit. The senior executive circulates the note in confusion because he feels like that Twitter has been really compliant. So, the government's saying, why didn't you do what we told you here? We need more information. We need more control. And he's like, I don't understand why you're asking me for these things, why you're pushing me. And he circulates the note and he says, I don't know what they're so upset about because I've definitely been clear with them that official state propaganda is definitely a thing. So it's like you're saying to your boyfriend, I gave you what you wanted. What are you talking about? I gave you everything. Like, that state propaganda is definitely a thing on Twitter. We're besties. You don't need more. We're good. Now, someone from the FBI responded to these files.
We've been doing your bidding. Now, the narrative has been shaped because of what you wanted, right? You've been able to block and censor. So that's definitely a thing. Like what you've got, what you've been able to accomplish.
Your state propaganda is definitely a thing. So the clip that you just played of Mayorkas saying that the Homeland Security didn't get involved in private companies and censorship was absolutely a lie because we have emails from DHS. Now, someone from the FBI responded to these files and saying, well, hey, the FBI regularly engages with private companies in order to identify foreign malign influence characters. But that does not account for them tracking and engaging with private sector about citizens,
right?
About domestic issues. And it certainly doesn't give them the right to act as a subsidiary of a media company that basically made Twitter state-run media.
Yeah, that's exactly what they are. And Facebook as well. Again, if they're describing them as a subsidiary, they're literally telling and sending these things to employees and telling them you remove all of these accounts, censor all of these accounts. Oh, and by the way, we're paying you $3 million for all of this staffing time.
Yes.
We've provided the staff. We've got, the 17 different members from the FBI that are on your staff at Twitter. And we're going to make sure that this is all policed and done properly. That is a subsidiary.
Well, and think about think about it as well, that the FBI can't just say, okay, we're just going to take $3 million that we just have laying around. They have to get approval from that money has to come from our government, from us.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they had to get approved somehow.
Well, I mean, again, this comes back to the black, the black funding that I've talked with Colonel McGregor about. It's like, how are we funding? How are you as a U.S. taxpayer paying for mercenaries in Ukraine right now? U.S. mercenaries in Ukraine, like you are paying for that. Like you're paying for American troops to be in Ukraine on a black budget salary, and that's where a lot of the stuff just gets funneled from these black budget salaries. The black budget money that you don't ever see. They don't actually vote on it in public. You don't ever see it. It's not a congressional hearing or anything. It just pops into a.
I mean, it turns out you see a list, like a Slack channel. In the Michael Schellenberger release that came a few hours ago, that there were so many former FBI employees that they had their own Slack channel, private Slack channel called BU alum, like bureau, I suppose.
Bureau alum. Can you imagine?
BU alum.
They had their own Slack channel where they were like, that's where the feds hang out. Like, don't.
Right.
Oh my God.
Okay, we're working on this today. What does,
What
does J. Edgar Hoover want?
Let's go after other Hollywood actors.
This is some Pinky in the Brain kind of stuff. Like, what are we going to do today, guys? The same thing we do every day. Let's suppress free speech.
Yes.
Like, seriously.
Good. I'll meet you at the coffee. You put on a pot of coffee. Let's go oppress and censor some people. We're going to be watching this closely because we're waiting for the COVID files and all this. But that's number 7 from Schellenberger. So we'll see if we get an investigation here. But this is really one of the biggest stories, and the mainstream media just largely ignoring it. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at Redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to Redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.